In the cold open of The Sopranos, before we've seen a single body drop, before any therapy breakthrough, before we even understand what kind of show we're watching, Tony Soprano says one sentence, quietly, to his psychiatrist, about his work. Lately, I'm getting the feeling that I came in at the end. The best is over. That's the entire show. 6 seasons, 86 episodes. A mob captain pushing 40, who has been killing people since 1982, sits down in front of a stranger and confesses the thesis of David Chase's masterpiece in his very first line, and dares you to notice. Here's what's strange. After that pilot, Chase basically buries the theme. He never lets another character speak about it directly, with one single exception. In the season 1 finale, Silvio Dante sits down with Tony, Paulie, and Christopher to discuss the elephant in the room, Tony's therapy. And calm, careful Silvio says the line that haunts the rest of the show. Look, this thing of ours, the way it's going, it'd be better if we could admit to each other these painful, stressful times, but it'll never fucking happen.
Well, it'll never fucking happen.
That's the trap. Every character on this show knows on some level that the glory days are gone. None of them can say it out loud. They eat, they yell, they cheat, they kill, they go to therapy, they tell stories about the old days, and the entire enterprise is one long act of refusing to admit what Tony admitted in the opening minutes of episode 1. So when you ask what The Sopranos is actually about, strip away the family drama, the panic attacks, the ducks. What's left is a group of men holding awake for a world they refuse to bury. Start with the simplest piece of evidence. Look at who Tony has to work with. The next generation of this mob is a disaster, and the show is brutally honest about it. Christopher Moltisanti, his heir, his project, is a heroin addict who wants to be in movies. He's a decent earner when he's clean. He's also a man whose deepest ambition is to make a low-budget mob slasher film called Cleaver, and have Tony look upon him with pride. That's the future boss. And the bench behind him? AJ, Jackie Jr., Matthew Bevilacqua, Sean Gismonti, Vito Jr., the kid in the goth makeup. These are the men this thing of theirs is supposed to be passed down to. The show does not flinch. It shows you, episode after episode, that there's nothing to inherit because there's no one capable of inheriting it. Here's the part that breaks your heart if you watch it carefully. Tony knows. Tony knows Christopher is not boss material. The plan was to put Chrissy out front as street boss, to take the heat from the FBI while Tony stayed in the background. He's building a human shield and calling it a dynasty. Pause on that for a second. The man at the top of this operation is so starved for trust that he's willing to elevate an addict because at least the addict is family. That's a confession of weakness dressed up as tradition. And Phil Leotardo, old guard, 20 years in prison, his mouth shut the whole time, looks around at the modern mob, looks at men who flip the second the feds knock on the door, and you can see him calculating whether anything he sacrificed for was even real. Look at how Tony talks about the old-timers when they actually show up. He worships them in the abstract. Then Feech LaManna gets out of prison, and Tony has him sent right back inside by planting stolen goods in his garage.
The class of 2004.
The class of 2004 arrives, and they spend their time complaining that the young guys ruined everything. The myth of the old days survives only as long as the old men stay safely dead. And then there's the scene that quietly tells you everything. Season 6, Episode 8. Patsy Parisi and Bert Gervaisi walk into a Starbucks-style coffee chain that just opened in their neighborhood. They're there to do what mobsters have done for 100 years. Shake the place down. Take the envelope. Remind the manager who he works for. The manager is a kid, calm, articulate. He listens to their threats about vandalism, about something happening to the staff, and he answers them politely. He can't authorize anything. Decisions go through corporate in Seattle, and then he delivers the line that ends the conversation. Look, every last fucking coffee bean is in the computer. It has to be accounted for. If the numbers don't add up, I'd be gone, and someone else will be here. Patsy listens. Bert listens. By the end of it, 2 career criminals can do nothing but nod, slowly, and walk out into the street. And Patsy delivers the line that should be carved into the show's tombstone. It's over for the little guy.
It's over for the little guy.
Think about the layers of that. Patsy, a man who has spent his life crushing the little guy, is lamenting that the little guy can't be crushed anymore. He grieves the loss of his own ability to oppress. He has assimilated the language of the people he used to terrorize, and he doesn't even notice. What finally beat the mob was a spreadsheet. Look at the bigger picture in the same season. Tony sells the building that houses Caputo's live poultry to Jamba Juice, and Patsy and Bert find out only when they go to collect their weekly envelope and discover the place is closing. Patsy stands in the middle of his old neighborhood and asks the question every dying culture asks. What the fuck is happening to this neighborhood?
The fuck is happening to this neighborhood?
He's looking right at the answer. Tony just sold it. And in the final episode, Butch DeConcini, capo of the New York family, takes a phone call walking down Mulberry Street. As he hangs up, he looks around and realizes he's in Chinatown. The voiceover of a tour bus rolls by, narrating the death of his world. The famous Little Italy, it says, once covered over 40 square blocks. Now it's been reduced to one row of shops and cafes. He's standing inside the announcement of his own extinction. It's over for the little guy. The little guy was them all along. Now here's where the show gets really brutal. Because Chase isn't satisfied with showing you that the glory days are over, he wants to ask a harder question. Were the glory days ever real? Watch the season 5 episode called In Camelot. Tony discovers his late father's old mistress, Fran Felstein, at a family funeral. He spends the next several days chasing the romance of her stories. The smoke and the suits and the Kennedy-era affairs, the mid-century cocktail hour mythology of the men who came before him. And by the end, every shred of that fantasy has rotted through. Johnny Boy wasn't a king. He was a selfish, lying man who chose his mistress over his hospitalized wife the night she lost a baby, gave away Tony's childhood dog as a present to Fran's son, and made his own teenage son cover up his lies. The episode just before that, called Rat Pack, does something similar. A construction guy named Jack Masserone gifts Tony a framed painting of Sinatra and the Boys, pure American mythology, at a quiet diner meeting. Tony is moved by it. He talks about how he and Masserone bonded. Then he finds out Masserone has been wearing a wire and a baseball cap. Tony orders the hit. Masserone's body is found in the trunk of his car with a golf club cover stuffed in his mouth, and Tony drives onto the Pulaski Skyway and throws the Rat Pack painting straight into the Hackensack River. What was Chase telling us? The old-timers couldn't see rats either. The old-timers were lying about how smart they were. The mythology was always a coping mechanism for men who couldn't bear to look at their own lives clearly. And the cruelest line in the entire series might be this one. Tony, of all people, says it to Polly. Late in season 6, the FBI starts digging up the bones of a small-time bookie named Willie Overall, Tony's very first murder, committed back in 1982 when he was 22 years old. Tony and Polly flee to Miami to lie low, and during a dinner there, while Polly won't stop reminiscing about the old days, Tony snaps. Remember when is the lowest form of conversation.
Remember when is the lowest form of conversation.
Tony says that. Tony, the man whose entire personality is one long remember when. He spends his life mining the past for proof that he was once part of something noble, and the moment Polly reflects his own habit back at him, Tony can't stand to be in the same room. And there's the architecture of the show. The contradiction is the whole point. These men are addicted to a memory of themselves that wasn't true even when it was happening. The World War II soldiers Tony admires from his History Channel documentaries, they fought to rid the world of thugs. He is a thug. The mafia that supposedly protected the peasants, it exploited them as soon as it had the power to do so. The 1950s America he longs for, the same America that produced his father, a small-time gangster his therapist gradually exposes as a sad, ordinary man with a violent temper and a small life. The whole show is one long realization that there was no golden age. There were only generations of men telling themselves stories so they wouldn't have to face the moment they were actually living in. This is where most people miss what The Sopranos was actually doing. It was never just a mob show. It was an autopsy of America in real time, broadcast every Sunday night, dressed up in a leather jacket so HBO would put it on the air. Watch what Tony calls himself when anyone outside the life asks him what he does. A businessman, a waste management consultant.
Waste management consultant.
Never a soldier, never a gangster, a businessman. The very word the corporate world uses to describe itself. The mob, by the year 2000, had spent a century begging to be let into the American mainstream, and the moment it succeeded, it disappeared into it. The smart kids became Dr. Melfi. The ambitious ones became Cusimano with the golf clubs in the second home. The rest became Christopher. It's why The Sopranos premiered in January of 1999, at the absolute tail end of the dot-com euphoria, just over a year before the bubble would burst. It's why the season after 9/11 feels different, and why the premiere of that season was literally titled For All Debts, Public and Private. Chase wasn't just chronicling the death of a subculture. He was chronicling the moment America stopped believing its own story about itself. The mob's decline maps onto something larger: the shrinking factory floors, the vanishing main streets. The phrase, "it's over for the little guy," said by the very people who helped make it over. The thin bench of the next generation, the nostalgia industrial complex, selling everyone a version of the past that never quite existed. The Sopranos didn't just end the golden age of the mob movie. It announced that the golden age was a marketing campaign all along. That's why no major mob film really landed after it for years. There was nothing left to say. The Irishman, when it finally arrived, played like an epilogue. Old men in a nursing home, asking each other if any of it was worth it. The answer the show keeps whispering is no. At the very end of the series, almost everyone is dead or gone. Christopher, smothered by Tony in a car wreck. Bobby, shot in a model train hobby store. Silvio, in a coma after being ambushed in his car. Vito, Phil, Junior is alive but doesn't know his own name. Paulie sits outside Satriali's, unnerved by a stray cat that keeps staring at a photograph of the dead. And somewhere, in a diner that may or may not be the last room of Tony Soprano's life, the bell on the door rings, and the screen goes black. The whole show is Tony's first session with Melfi, stretched across 86 hours, and never resolved. I came in at the end.
That I came in at the end.
He was right when he said it. And then, he spent the next 6 seasons refusing to say it again. Here's what I want to know in the comments. Was it the coffee shop scene? The painting in the river? Little Italy disappearing into Chinatown? Which moment in The Sopranos was the one where you finally saw what David Chase was really telling us about America? Tell me below. And if you want to go deeper into how this show buried a genre on its way out, the next video is already waiting for you.